Most people treat this question like it belongs on a calculator. Should you pay off your mortgage early or should you invest instead? I understand why. On the surface, it looks like a math problem. One side says a guaranteed return is a guaranteed return. The other side says the market has historically earned more. Both statements contain truth. Neither statement is enough by itself because this is not only about arithmetic, it is about risk, it is about timing, it is about control, and for a great many people, it is about peace of mind. That is why two intelligent people can look at the same mortgage rate and the same market history and still make different decisions without either one being crazy. Now, if I were stripping this down to its core, I would say the decision comes down to one question: is your mortgage rate higher or lower than what you can reasonably expect to earn after taxes, after risk, and over your actual time horizon? That is the real equation, not the clean television version, the real one. And once you look at it that way, some fairly clear zones start to emerge. The first is what I would call the mortgage zone. This is usually where mortgage rates fall somewhere around 0 to 4%. In this range, the math leans strongly toward investing instead of rushing to eliminate the debt. Why? Because over long periods, stocks have historically returned more than that, and even balanced portfolios have often returned more than that. But there's another force helping you in this zone that many people do not respect enough. Inflation. If your mortgage is fixed at 3% and inflation runs in the 2 to 3% range over time, then the real cost of that debt becomes very small. The payment stays fixed. Your income usually rises, prices rise. The mortgage payment does not. That means the burden of the payment shrinks over time in real terms. So a low-rate fixed mortgage is not just cheap. It often gets cheaper as the years go by. That is a very valuable thing, and that is why people with very low-rate mortgages should be extremely careful before destroying one of the better liabilities they will ever have, simply because the word debt makes them uncomfortable. Now let us move into the gray zone. This is roughly 4 to 6%. This is where the easy certainty disappears. This is where slogans become less useful, because now the spread between your mortgage cost and your likely after-tax investment return becomes narrow enough that behavior, taxes, volatility, age, and liquidity start mattering a lot more. At 5% or 5.5%, the mortgage is no longer so cheap that the answer is obvious. At the same time, it is not yet so expensive that early payoff becomes an unquestionable win. You are now in a zone where judgment matters, and judgment is what most people try to avoid because they want a universal answer. I do not believe in universal answers in personal finance. I believe in trade-offs. Then you enter what I would call the pay-it-off zone. Once the mortgage starts getting into the 6% range and above, the case for paying it down grows much stronger, because now every extra dollar sent to principal is earning something very close to a guaranteed 6% or more. That is hard to beat once you factor in taxes and the fact that market returns are not delivered smoothly. A 6.5% guaranteed return is not economically identical to a hoped for 7% market return that arrives through years of volatility, disappointment, and bad timing. That difference matters, especially as you age, because the younger investor is mainly solving for growth. The older investor is increasingly solving for durability. That is a different problem. Now, before we go further, I want to correct a common shortcut that makes this whole debate worse. People say the market returns 7 to 10%. So obviously investing beats paying off the mortgage. Not so fast. You do not always keep the headline return. Taxes matter, account type matters, portfolio design matters, turnover matters. If your investments sit in taxable accounts, you may be dealing with dividend tax drag, capital gains drag, and whatever damage your own activity does to the compounding process. So the right comparison is not mortgage rate versus some market statistic pulled out of the sky. It is mortgage rate versus what you are likely to keep. That is the adult comparison. And then there is risk. This is where spreadsheet thinking gets people into trouble. Paying off the mortgage gives you certainty. Investing gives you probability. Those are not the same thing. A guaranteed 6% is not the same as a hoped for 6% or 7% from the market. The market may deliver more over time. It may also hand you several bad years in the wrong order. And sequence matters a great deal. If you are 35 A bad stretch in the market is annoying if you are 60, still carrying a large mortgage and preparing to draw on your portfolio. A bad stretch can be much more damaging. That is why time horizon is one of the most important variables in the whole conversation. The young investor has decades for compounding and recovery. The near retiree does not. And once you understand that, the better question stops being, which option has the higher expected return? The better question becomes, which option makes my plan more resilient? That is the question serious people ask. Now let me show you what I mean by walking through two very different people with the same mortgage. Take a $400,000 mortgage at 6.5% on a 30-year fixed loan for a 35-year-old. I still lean toward investing as the dominant priority, even though 6.5% is no joke. Why? Because at 35, time is still the greatest asset you have. Your earning power may still be rising, you may still be decades away from retirement, and every invested dollar has an enormous amount of runway to compound that matters more than most people appreciate. A dollar invested at 35 has a very different life than a dollar first invested at 45 or 50. So for that younger person, I would not be eager to starve the portfolio just to become mortgage free at top speed. That can feel disciplined and still be very expensive in long-term opportunity cost. But notice what I did not say. I did not say ignore the mortgage. At 6.5%, I do not ignore it. I simply do not let it dominate the whole strategy. For a 35-year-old, I often like a hybrid approach. Invest aggressively, protect the compounding years, but also put something extra toward the mortgage, because 6.5% deserves respect. Now take that same mortgage and give it to a 45-year. Old, the answer starts to shift. Retirement is closer. Recovery time is shorter. Fixed expenses begin to matter more. The portfolio, if it exists, is more exposed to sequence risk as it approaches the stage where it may actually need to fund life. At that point, paying down the mortgage becomes less about winning a theoretical return contest and more about making the whole plan sturdier. Reducing fixed expenses before retirement is one of the smartest and most underrated acts in personal finance, because fixed expenses create fragility, and fragility is the enemy. The lower your fixed monthly burden, the lower the withdrawal pressure on your portfolio, and the lower the odds that bad market timing wrecks an otherwise decent retirement. That is why older households often rationally shift toward paying the mortgage down faster, not because they gave up on investing, because their objective changed. Now let us come back to the numbers for a moment. A $400,000 mortgage at 6.5% produces a monthly payment around $2,500 and total payments of well over $900,000 across 30 years. That means the interest bill is enormous. If you add even $500 a month of extra principal in the early years, you can cut years off the loan and save over $100,000 in interest. That is real money. But if you take that same $500 and invest it over a long enough period at a reasonable return assumption, it can grow into a sum that is much larger than the interest saved. That is also real money. So what is the lesson? Not that one side is virtuous and the other is foolish. The lesson is that you are comparing a guaranteed savings stream with a probabilistic wealth stream, and your age, your liquidity, your retirement timing, and your psychological tolerance decide which side deserves more weight. Now let us talk about liquidity, because too many people make this decision while pretending it does not exist. A paid off house feels wonderful, I understand that, but once you throw extra cash into the walls of the house, that money is not liquid, it becomes equity, and equity is not always accessible on the terms you want. A larger investment account and a healthy cash reserve can give you flexibility that a lower mortgage balance sometimes cannot. That matters. So if aggressively paying off the mortgage leaves you cash poor, investment poor, and fragile, then even if the math looked defensible, the plan may still be weak. That is why I never isolate the mortgage question from the rest of the household balance sheet. A family with strong reserves and stable income can handle the decision one way. A family with weak reserves, unpredictable income, or retirement approaching has to treat it differently. Always context. Now here's where I think many sensible people actually land. They do not want an extreme answer. They want a durable one, but that is often the right instinct in the gray zone, and sometimes even a little above it depending on age and liquidity. A hybrid approach can be excellent. You invest, you keep feeding the compounding engine, but you also send extra money to principal, you reduce regret, you improve control, you keep optionality, you do not have to choose total war on one side. That is a grown-up answer. Too many people want the drama all in investing or all in debt freedom. Life usually rewards the people who can hold nuance without freezing. Now let me tell you what I think matters most, and it is not a number, it is your objective. If your goal is to maximize expected wealth over a long runway and your mortgage is low, then the evidence usually leans toward investing. If your goal is to simplify life, reduce fixed expenses, and make your retirement more durable, then paying down the mortgage becomes much more attractive. That is why I dislike when this debate turns moral, as if one side is disciplined and the other side is reckless. Number the right answer depends on what problem you are actually solving: growth or resilience, optionality or control, maximum upside or minimum fragility. Those are not the same goals. So here's the framework I would leave you with. If your mortgage is under about 4%, lean strongly toward investing unless your emotional need for debt freedom is overwhelming. If your mortgage is over about 6%, lean much more seriously toward paying it down, especially if you are in your 40s, 50s, or moving toward retirement. If you are in the middle, consider splitting the extra cash. Some to the market, some to the mortgage. That approach may not maximize every possible dollar in every possible world, but it often produces something more valuable, a financial life that still works under multiple outcomes. And that, to me, is what real personal finance should do. Not create the most aggressive spreadsheet. Create a plan you can live with, a plan you can stick with, a plan that lets you sleep, because in the end, this decision is not really about whether one line on a chart slopes higher than another. It is about whether your financial life becomes more stable, more flexible, and more aligned with the phase of life you're actually in. If paying off the mortgage gives you that, then the return is not only interest saved, it is control of keeping the mortgage, and investing gives you that. Then the return is not only expected market growth, it is optionality. Both matter. The trick is knowing which one your life needs more right now.